Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for the slight delay in the start time. It was mostly due to my fault on the computer, just making a slight mistake there. No, it wasn't my fault. It was the website fault. I'm going to blame it. But anyways, great to have you on a Friday. And how about that? I think this is 4 live streams this week. And so that's pretty good. Maybe I should give myself a raise. And today we're going to have some interesting discussion that we'll get to engage in with the continued controversy discussion surrounding the protest at the church in Minnesota. And every single time that there's any kind of political event that takes place, the protests that go on, the progressive, ideologically aligned group decides that they are going to weaponize and use the Christian faith against us, right? So that basically they play a game of what would Jesus do, and it's interesting because every time they play that game of what would Jesus do, Jesus always turns out to be a very radical leftist every single time. And I think that the answer to the bad teaching, the incorrect theology, always goes back to what saith the Scriptures, right? What does the Bible actually say? And so we're going to be exploring a little bit of that today, and I appreciate you being interested in what we're doing here. We had a really good engagement yesterday for Theology Thursday, which really meant a lot to me. I will remind you, Sunday morning, as of right now, as of right now, we are planning on having church service. The only reason why we wouldn't is if we are covered in a sheet of ice. There is some possibility there that weather might get pretty severe. That's what they're calling for. It looks like we're going to be missing out on a lot of the snow and instead be getting a whole bunch of ice. That's what they're calling for right now. So kids may not get to build a snowman. Depending on how bad the weather gets, we also may not be doing church service. I don't know. It just depends on how severe it gets. And I know that some of you that live up north and whatever, you kind of laugh, ha, right? You get a little bit of ice and everything shuts down, but it's just different here. I don't know. Maybe we're not prepared for it. We're not geared up for it. And we're just not able to keep the roads clear. But it can get kind of dangerous, especially for some of those back roads that a number of our church members actually do travel in order to get to service. So just stay tuned. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe we'll go live on Sunday. Maybe we won't. But regardless, we'll be back at some point. And so really do hope that all that goes well. The rest of you who are in the line of these storms, please be careful, all right? Be careful if you go out and you travel. All right, let's go ahead and get into some, it'll be political discussion, but also theological discussion because these things often overlap. And so, interesting article from the New York Post. Minnesota BLM leader brags about helping to organize church protest, and I'm trying to get past all of these ads here to where you can potentially see it. But once again, of course, as this always goes, anytime that the left protests anything, they claim that Jesus would be marching right alongside them because Jesus is a left-winger, according to all of them. Like, think of He Gets Us, right? Those commercials that you've seen before. And I guess when the Super Bowl comes, are we going to see another one of those? Probably. Maybe I'll do another Super Bowl reaction video at some point to the commercials. But yes, here it is. Minnesota BLM leader brags about helping to organize church protest and compares them to Jesus. So it was Christ-like, according to him, for the protesters to go in, interrupt church service, and basically berate them, condemn them, those wicked white Christians, for not opening up their doors and allowing all the third world people to come in, even though I don't think any of the left does that either. They prefer to have somebody else deal with the actual consequences of their decisions. And how do they build that argument? Of course, they will mention Jesus cleansing the temple, right? And so when Jesus comes in and runs out those money changers, and you can go to John chapter 2 if you want to look at an account. Now that's far from the only account, but John is one of those. And so here you go. And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the money changers' money, and overthrew the tables. And said unto them that sold doves, Take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. And his disciples remembered that it was written, The zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. And so Jesus coming in with the scourge of small cords, driving out the money changers, driving out all the sheep and the oxen and so on. This is the same thing as, it will be the same thing as these protesters, or it's equivalent to the protesters going into this church in Minnesota and condemning the conservative Christians for supporting ICE, all right, supporting federal law. We can go ahead and read the article a little bit further here and get a little bit more hindsight, or a little bit more insight, I guess we could say. And so it says, Chantil Allen. I guess that's how you say that, Chantil? Anyways, leaders of Black Lives Matter Twin Cities proudly told TMZ that she played a key role in rallying protesters to storm the city's church in St. Paul during Sunday service over their belief that a pastor was also working as an immigration and customs enforcement ICE official. First of all, if she is admitting to rallying them to storm this church, should she not be arrested? Because they did break the law. You don't have the right. And once again, quit arguing the FACE Act. I keep hearing people, even Michael Knowles, who I like a lot, they keep referencing the FACE Act as, hey, they're violating, law. You weren't allowed to break into a church service and interrupt private service anyways, okay? So quit referring to the FACE Act. The FACE Act is a wicked law that is used to prevent people from praying outside of abortion clinics. But if she's admitting to that, then she should be arrested. Allen claimed the protest, which is under federal investigation, needed to be done to get the message across. And so there's, I believe that's her speaking about the matter. And so moving on here, getting away from that ad. Once again, lots of ads. They got to make some money somehow, I guess. Maybe if I had ads just running all the time, I could make some more money. Says, you have these people in our community just really terrorizing our children and our women and our different immigration community or immigrant communities, the BLM leader claimed of federal agents. And so clearly because there was a pastor there, because that church had multiple pastors, that was a ICE officer, you needed to storm the church. And then we have the head of this whole operation standing in a pulpit preaching to a congregation every Sunday morning, she claimed. And that was really just not okay for us. And so because it was not okay for you, you have the right and the privilege to walk into the church and interrupt service. Allen, who said her mom was a pastor, I'll read that one more time for anybody who missed that. Allen, who said her mom was a pastor, women cannot be pastors, boldly compared their actions to Jesus' cleansing of the temple. Once again, there it is. Jesus cleansed the temple. We cleanse this evil city's conservative church for supporting federal law surrounding immigration enforcement. I grew up in the church, and one of the things that I remember about Jesus Christ is that when things weren't going right in the church, he went in and flipped tables. First of all, Jesus did not go in a church. He went into the temple. And when things weren't going right, what do we mean by going right there? Was it because of the illegal, I guess I'll use a nice word, the undocumented immigrants who were being mistreated by federal ICE officials in the days of Jesus? Is that why he went and flipped tables? Or was it because there was corruption going on inside the temple? She said, suggesting that's what they did. Dozens of protesters, which frequently fired indie reporter Don Lemon, covering their every step. Frequently fired. I guess that's the New York Post adding that comment there that Don Lemon is frequently fired. He was recently fired from CNN, right? And then did he have like some other brief stint somewhere, and then now he's just kind of on his own? They stormed the church on Sunday just as service was starting and called out resident pastor David Eastwood for allegedly moonlighting as the acting field office director for ICE in Minnesota. And so here's some of the picture there of the protesters interrupting the church service. It's kind of a nice looking church there. Yeah, I'm not against churches looking like a church. I think churches shouldn't look like a warehouse. Eastwood, they actually have a typo there. Eastwood was not at the church at the time. Then officials have yet to confirm that the pastor is the same David Eastwood who works for ICE. However, the pastor's personal information appears to match that of the acting director of the ICE St. Paul field office in court filings. And so, with that in mind, yeah, their storming of the church is justified because Jesus went into the temple to flip tables. You are used to this by now. You have seen this approach before. You just need to just get used to the pattern, okay? You're going to see it a lot. Every time a Christian tries to stand up and speak out about something, whether it's, hey, we've got a country that is being overrun with illegal immigrants. They don't speak our language. Many of them are violent. And maybe it's not good for our country to have all of these people here illegally. How dare you? Didn't you know that Jesus was an immigrant? How dare you? Did you not know that Jesus said, what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me? And then they'll build their case for why every good Christian should actually be a crazy Marxist liberal. Now, what's funny is there are those who I guess you could argue are more like the David Platt type, the spineless Christianity, that will still give lip service to defending the unborn, because David Platt will give lip service to defending the unborn, but then he'll turn around and write a book before an election saying, hey, you probably don't need to vote for Republicans because Republicans don't help the poor enough. So go ahead and vote for the Democrats who openly support murdering babies. Like, that's just David Platt's whole position there. Do I remind you, we are losing subscribers. And that's okay. But I think it's mostly because YouTube unsubscribes people from our channel, not that they choose to do so. And it's because I say things like that. And so they'll weaponize that. They'll point to the least of these and claim that that means everybody in the whole world. When, in truth, Jesus is speaking about caring for fellow Jews, fellow brethren. In that context, it's quite clear. And so in the case of Jesus going in and turning over the tables, the money changers, Jesus said, my house will be a house of prayer. You have made it a den of thieves. Jesus did not storm the temple and interrupt whatever was going on there to call out somebody that was currently, or they thought was supposedly in the temple, for something that they were doing outside of the temple. Right? Some of you, there's some of you in here who, I don't know, whatever scenario you want to use, are working for the Roman government. Right? Some of you in this temple are tax collectors. So I'm going to interrupt the temple service to address something that goes on outside of the temple. That is the equivalent that they're trying to draw there, and that's not what happens in the scriptures. Jesus goes in to address a very specific issue in the temple itself. And need I remind you, when you see Jesus in his ministry, let's just say that his focus was not on the Gentiles. As a matter of fact, you could say that Jesus was entirely focused on Israel. You may recall when he sent out the disciples, go not unto the Gentiles, don't go to Samaria, but go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That was his focus. When I can't remember which one, I always say Syrophoenician, it may be the woman who asks to be healed, or maybe for the sake of her son, actually. I think it's like her son that needs to be healed. Jesus says it's not fit to take meat for the children and give it unto the dogs. And says, yes, sir. The woman says, yes, sir, but even the dogs eat from the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Once again, this argument, every time you see this case made by progressives that Jesus would be on their side, that he would be protesting in the church right along with them, it always shows just they have no idea what the Bible is about. Zero. Okay, zero. Even like Don Lemon, who claims, does Don Lemon claim to be a Christian? Is Don Lemon a Christian? And maybe he's not, I don't know. Yes, Don Lemon identifies as a Christian. Okay. Don Lemon, during the course of there was an interview, and I don't have it on film, but you'll have to watch it. He proposed that he highly suggested. No, he didn't highly suggest. He just said it. He proposed the scenario that Mary was pregnant with Christ not by the conception of the Holy Ghost, but rather she just got pregnant. And that Joseph was a homosexual, and so they made this agreement to protect Mary and whatnot. That is a guy who's calling himself a Christian. Never, ever, ever, let me tell you one more time, never, ever, ever let a left-wing person, let a progressive come up to you and let them act as if they know the Bible and they can point to the example of Christ as support for their left-wing ideology. They know this much about the Bible. All right, as more time goes on, the more I realize they know absolutely nothing. And it's so evident because these same people who would claim Jesus wants you to care for the immigrant, who wants you to feed the poor, and so on, which there's an argument to make those cases to a degree depending on the circumstance, right? Certainly, you can see the Apostle Paul speaks to the matter of those who do not have, that are lacking, caring for them, bearing one another's burdens, and so on. You can see some of that. Now, a lot of that's in the context of the church itself. It's not really necessarily a broad instruction to care for every single man, but those within the church. But what it always evolves into is it leaves, once again, that spineless Christianity of David Platt, and it jumps into you must trans your kid. It always goes to the most extreme thing. They never just stay in this pacifist realm of Christianity in which, hey, just love everybody and be peaceable and so on. Like, it never stays there. That's why I'm telling you guys, the Pope, the more that I see Pope Leo talk, the more that I see, Pope Francis before he died, they're creeping ever more towards progressivism. Now, granted, there's a lot of writings in Catholic tradition that slows that steady descent, but it just always evolves into that. That's why yesterday my sister, Casey, had the question about, do women have the authority to teach? And we talked about the proper biblical position that men are to teach. The women should learn in silence, but that doesn't mean that there's no area for a woman to teach. Women are called to teach good things to the young women, and certainly women, they nurture, care for, raise up children. A woman teaching a Sunday school class to children is absolutely fine. But every church that you find that lets the door open a little bit to where, hey, a woman is teaching the men, you're going to at some point just have a female pastor. And once you get to that point, it's kind of the point of no return. You don't come back from that, all right? You're not able to overcome that. That's the fatal blow. And so just wanted to spend some time reflecting on that, this argument of what would Jesus do. If Jesus came back today, I would say that probably his focus is going to be to plant his feet on the Mount of Olives and reign in Israel. That would probably be his objective, because that's what the Bible says. It's always amazing to me how the left and evangelicalism to some degree, which evangelicalism and the left, evangelicalism is a gateway drug to the left in a lot of ways. They always want to speak for Jesus. Jesus would not approve of this. Jesus would say this. Jesus would do that. When you find somebody who is a fundamentalist and really just focused on biblical literalism, they don't really do the what would Jesus do thing. They don't do the, oh, Jesus would have to say this. They would just point to what he's already said. Because there is a degree of, I guess, can I use the word fear? For those of us that really have a high reverence for God, and we don't want to weaponize him. We don't want to turn him into a tool to be used at our disposal. Oh, well, God would certainly say this. God would certainly say that. God has already spoken. All right. God has already given us his word, and we can look at what he says. What do the scriptures say? So when it comes to a particular issue, like what do you think that God would think of this? Well, if I look at the totality of the Bible, almost every area of life, and you can probably argue every area, maybe not directly, but indirectly, God has spoken, and you can determine God's position on a matter. You don't have to play the game of, well, if God was here today, here's what he would have to, well, God is here, but if God was directly speaking about this today, here is what he would have to say, right? This is what Jesus would say. I think a good sound Bible student, a good theologian, they don't play the game of, if Jesus was here today, he would say this. They would say, here's what he said in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You could even point to maybe some other things that he has said. Here's some other things that he has spoken in other passages, what have you, whether that's the angel of the Lord, or maybe in the book of Acts, or even Revelation, if you want to go there. But we know what he said. So we don't need to take Jesus and turn him into a pawn for our agenda. We have the Word of God, and we'll just cite Scripture. And when they invoke the words of Jesus or his actions, you and I who know the Scriptures, we just go to it and we pay attention to the context and we understand what he was saying, what he meant, what that action meant, what the objective, the purpose of that action was. Never, ever let the left have the high ground on claiming that Jesus would have defended their positions, because those people don't know a bloomin' thing about the Word of God. They don't. They don't know a blooming thing. So ignore them. Ignore them. Ignore them. Refute them. It's absolutely absurd. Okay, absolutely absurd. And that kind of leads us into our next segment here, because I just want you to know the left is far from beaten. Okay, the battle is not over. All right, the battle is not over. This is from the Christian Post here. I don't know if we have anybody from Virginia. I know we've got some West Virginia folks who tune in every now and then. But from the Christian Post, abortion, gay marriage, 4 constitutional amendments approved by Virginia legislature. The left is not slowing down. I know there were some people that thought, oh, Trump won. The Republicans won overall. They kept the House. They kept the Senate. The Republicans won the popular vote, so therefore the left is going to moderate. No. Not so fast. You need to hit the brakes on that. The left has not moderated at all. I do not think that they have given up on even things like transgenderism. They have certainly not given up on abortion. They have not given up on open borders. This is not the victory lap for the conservatives. This is the lull in the battle while the left is regaining their footing. Okay, they've been knocked off balance, granted. Yes, it was quite a blow, but they are far from over. Their ideologies have not changed. These people, in their worldview, it is not something that is shifting. They are committed to this. All right, so when the left gets power, like they do here in I'm trying to get back to my. Here in Virginia, they will just go back to the playbook. They will continue to double down. So Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, he's out now. Virginia does not have a Republican governor. They may never have another Republican governor. I don't know. Now in place is Democrat Abigail Spanberger, and she's a radical. She is a radical. The Democrats won the seats in the House of Delegates, and the Democrats still, and they hold the Senate as well. And so what's the focus that they have? Well, one is going to be establishing the right to abortion. House Joint Resolution 1 was approved by the Virginia House delegates in a 63-64 vote. Or sorry, 64-34 vote. I mean, that's a very large number there. On January 14th, and a 21-18 vote on January 16th. The vote fell along party lines, with all support coming from Democrats and all opposition coming from Republicans. This measure would establish a fundamental right to reproductive freedom. The words that they use always is just infuriating to me. Reproductive freedom. Murdering babies, that's what it means. In the Bill of Rights of the Virginia Constitution, clarifying that every individual has the fundamental right to murder their child. Now, it doesn't say murder their child, it says to reproductive freedom. Except for the babies are not free. They do not have the right to life. They don't have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You're taking it from them because you're murdering them in the womb, including the ability to make and carry out decisions related to one's own prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, and then they add abortion care, miscarriage management, and fertility care. An individual's right to reproductive freedom shall not be directly or indirectly denied, burdened, or infringed upon unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means, the proposed amendment states. And so while the proposal permits the state to regulate the provision of abortion care in the third trimester, it requires the allowance of late-term abortions in cases where a physician has determined that they are necessary to protect the life or physical or mental health of a pregnant woman. Notice that. It's not, so they're saying you can still have third trimester abortions. Folks, a third trimester baby can be born. All right, a third trimester baby can be born and very often is in the hospital for a very short amount of time. Protect the life or physical or mental health. What in the world are the parameters for that? Once again, murdering a baby is murdering a baby, no matter how you slice it. And I hate to even use that. That's a terrible way to say it, because that's exactly what they do. They cut up these babies in the womb and then they remove them. It's horrible. You can't even use just a figure of speech, because it actually applies to the evil things that they do. And so if a woman is having a mental health issue, you can kill the baby. Kill the baby. What woman does not have mental health issues in the third trimester? Just to be blunt a little bit. I mean, pregnancy, I've seen it, okay? I've seen it twice now with my wife. And it's a challenging time, because the mother's body is an amazing thing, but it is demanding. It takes a lot for a woman to be able to grow a child. So that means that her hormone levels and all sorts of other things get thrown off of their normal operating procedures. And it creates all sorts of challenges. Some women struggle greatly with depression when they are pregnant. You are just leaving the door wide open to murder a child under any given circumstance. This is absurd. This is absurd, and this is morally wrong. But they're not just stopping there at abortions. What's another thing that they're focusing on? Establishing a right to same-sex marriage. Establishing a right to same-sex marriage. Once again, Obergefell has not been overturned yet. I look forward to the day. But the Virginia House of Delegates passed House Joint Resolution 3 in a 67-31 vote on January 14th, while the Virginia Senate approved a 26-13 vote on January 16th. The measure achieved some degree of bipartisan support, with all Democrats and 3 House Republicans, a bunch of gutless, spineless cowards, in voting in favor, along with all Senate Democrats and 5 Senate Republicans. The measure removes the unenforced definition of marriage in the Virginia Bill of Rights, identifying it as only a union between one man and one woman. It's not just the Virginia Bill of Rights that defines it that way, but it's the Bible itself. And so they're not going to give up on that either. They're going to continue to double down and try to enshrine same-sex marriage. Also, authorizing a new congressional map. This is a major thing, and I think that you want to talk about something that's going to lead to the splintering and fracturing of the union, the federal government, which, hey, don't tempt me with a good time. It is the matter of Texas, which legitimately, I would argue that Texas legitimately needed to redraw their lines, because Texas is such a, still, at this point, still a strong enough red state that they should not get Jasmine Crockett, okay? California is already gerrymandered into oblivion, and they're gerrymandering it even more. Illinois is gerrymandered and just absolutely absurd. Virginia, which is already a blue state, they're gerrymandering it even more. And so with that, they're now wanting to continue to redraw the map to prevent any Republicans from getting any progress there. And if approved by voters, the measure would amend the Virginia Constitution to give the Virginia General Assembly the authority to modify the state's map of congressional districts if any other state engages in mid-decade redistricting for any purpose other than to comply with a court order. A state generally implements congressional maps immediately following a United States Census, but several states have adopted new congressional maps ahead of the 2026 election to provide an advantage to the dominant political party. That's because the census is, when the census was done in 2020, it grossly undercounted Texas and Florida. It was not accurate. New York had way too many in their census, and Texas and Florida did not. They were underrepresented because more people were moving there. And so that was a serious issue, and it needed to be addressed immediately. That was my position on the matter. If somebody has any proof to the opposite, then by all means present your case. Number 4, give felons the right to vote upon release from prison. The Virginia House of Delegates approved House Joint Resolution 2 in a 65-33 vote on January 14th, while the Virginia Senate passed it in a 21-18 vote. Nearly all support measure came from Democrats. You know, this one when it comes to the matter of you serving your time, okay, if you're a felon, if you do your time, if you serve your 15, 20, 30 years, I don't really like the idea. I mean, out of a sense of justice and just what is appropriate, why not restore their rights? I have an issue with nonviolent felons not being able to have a gun. You should be able to own a gun if you've committed a nonviolent felony. And really the only violent felonies, assault, battery, I believe, well, I don't know. I'm having to remember my legal lines now. And it partly depends on which state you're in. But murder, I guess. Murder, attempted murder, homicide, things like that. Those would be violent felons. Money laundering, grand theft auto, right? Stealing an automobile. Even like a gun crime, right? Maybe you're in possession of a gun that's you're not technically allowed to own. Maybe the barrel's a quarter inch too short, and so therefore that's a horrible, terrible thing. We've got to throw you in prison for a long time. So that one is, I don't know. I'm willing to have the discussion on it. But the rest of them just prove that the Democrats are still doubling down on the radicalism. I want to remind you, and I was born in 95, but the Cold War was not the end of Marxism. Okay? That did not defeat communism, ideas of socialism, and so on. So that should just serve as an example of just because the Republicans won the popular vote for the White House and controlled 3 branches of government, and we'll see what happens in the midterms. That is a thing that's going to happen. just because they were beat does not mean that they are down for the count. All right. I could see them coming back with a vengeance, especially with all that Trump has done, which some of us would say, hey, I'd like to see him do a lot more. But the Democrats see it as such a great threat, such radicalism. Imagine that you get an AOC in the White House. Just imagine. Or a Gavin Newsom to some degree. Think about all that they will do, all the efforts they will make to basically undo everything that Trump did. What they will do to our military, what they will do to our borders, what they will do to our position in the world stage. I mean, it can all be undone just like that. So many years of good. Example of the Bible, the kings of the Old Testament, the Northern Kingdom. There'd be a few decent kings here and there, and then all it would take is one bad king to put them all back in the hole that they were in before. Okay, so with all of that, we now have our final little session or section segment that we're going to be covering today. And if you have something that you want to discuss, if I get done a little bit early, which it's entirely possible, feel free to comment if you'd like to. It'd be great to hear from you if you have any thoughts, anything going through your mind on this Friday. But with that, let's go ahead and enter into our last segment of the show today. And I want to point out the Baptist Messenger. They are in Moore, Oklahoma, which, Moore, good job. Y'all haven't been hit by a tornado in a couple of years. There for a little while, Moore was just getting completely wiped out every single year, and then they would just rebuild. Just wiped out, rebuild, wipe out, rebuild. So good for them. Moore, First Baptist Moore, is to host the 2026 Priority of Preaching Conference. And so they have this conference every year. So it's an annual thing. We also have a conference. It's a Bible conference. And I would dare say it's better than this conference. And I don't say it arrogantly. I just say it feeling confident. Don't mistake my confidence for arrogance. And so the Priority Preaching Conference on February 2nd, so coming up pretty soon. Moore First will host the annual Priority of Preaching Conference from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. This event is presented by Oklahoma Baptist and is focused on helping pastors make progress in their preaching ministries. The theme for this year's conference is Preaching That Gives Life, and focused on constructing sermons that inspire and motivate the church. So, a couple things there. The focus of it is on sermons that inspire and motivate the church. So I think that they would say the measurement of a successful sermon is, did your sermon inspire the church? Did it motivate the church? Did it inspire them to read their Bible more, to pray more, to volunteer more, and did it motivate them to do those things, right? For each conference, speakers and instructors are brought in from around the country to speak on the conference's theme. This year, the conference speakers are Greg Gilbert, senior pastor of Louisville, 3rd Avenue, Kentucky, and Ben Panner, director of workshops for the Charles Simeon Trust, a ministry designed to raise up the next generation of expositional preachers. So, I don't know anything about Greg Gilbert. I don't know anything about Ben Panner. Maybe they're great guys, okay? They're very nice. They may be good golfers. I don't know anything about it. But I guess it sounds like their focus here is very much expositional teaching, expositional preachers. Gilbert has served as the senior pastor since 2010. He is also the author of What is the Gospel? That'd be interesting to read. What he would articulate and define as the gospel. I have no idea really what to expect there. And the co-author of Preach, Theology Meets Practice. Prior to entering the pastoral ministry, Gilbert received his bachelor's in history from Yale. Wow. And then got his master's of divinity from Southern Seminary. It's impressive. Yale. Wow. Panner has served as the Charles Simeon Trust Director of Workshops since 2024. He pastored 12 years at College Church in Wheaton, Illinois. He holds an. I think there's a lot of typos today. Are they not having AI write these? If AI wrote these would not have typos. They should start letting AI write their articles for them. And so another typo there. But anyways, and he holds a MDiv degree and has been a workshop director or workshop instructor for the Trust since 2018. For over a decade, the Priority of Preaching Conference has been a way for pastors to gain practical advice, and it is the entry point of training strategy to help pastors make progress in their preaching. Brett Selby, regional ministry partner for Oklahoma Baptists, has organized the conference every year and believes that no matter how experienced a pastor can be, there is always room to grow. Well, I certainly agree that all these pastors here in Oklahoma have a lot of room to grow. I say that as the young, arrogant preacher boy. Maybe they would listen to me because I have a beard right now, and you need a little bit of facial hair, because then they may think, oh, he's a Calvinist, and then I'll start preaching, and then maybe I'll lead them into right division without them even realizing it. And let's see, for more information on upcoming pastors events, you can read more about oklahomabaptist.org/pastors, and I don't know what all they have going on here. Priority of Preaching Conference, the MVP retreat, multi-vocational. They wanted their MVP acronym there, so they couldn't use bivocational, so they chose multi-vocational. New pastor staff orientation meeting, and then I guess they have the review of their 2025 Priority of Preaching conference here. So I don't know where this was at previously.
Well, good morning, guys. It's a joy to be back in Oklahoma, home of Shea Gilgis Alexander, Cason Wallace. And we're going to look today at the subject of context. But what I would like to do is spend about half of my time in...
Subject of... Whoops. Sorry. Let me turn that down. I turned it up so I could actually hear what he was saying. Subject of context, that's good. What I would say is, first of all, wear a sport coat. If you're not going to wear a sport coat, wear a tie. Why is it that preachers like to do this millennial type thing where, hey, we're not going to wear business casual or even, just business type clothes. Because this isn't business casual. Shirt's untucked. Yeah, it's a polo. It's a long sleeve polo. I don't know, just look the part. I mean, goodness, I wear a nice shirt and a sport coat. Don't ask me about the pants I'm wearing right now. They may or may not be blue jeans. But you don't know. I might be wearing some really nice slacks. This may be a suit, for all you know. That's why I sit at the table. But anyways, I don't know. The importance of context, I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting to watch this whole thing and see what he has to say about all of it. But... yeah, there you go. Just a little bit of highlight from last year on this Priority of Preaching Conference. What if they did ask Mark Baze to come speak at the Priority of Preaching Conference? That's, first of all, not going to happen. There will be some things I just guarantee you that will not happen. And if they do happen, it will be hilarious, and we will look back on this day and laugh. I will not ever be invited to speak at Falls Creek. All right, never. Falls Creek will never invite me. I will also never be invited to speak at any of the BGCO conferences. Okay, those are just two things that you can just pretty much bet on it. But if they did, right, what would I say? I would immediately say that our goal is not to inspire and motivate. Remember when I said that pastors nowadays are just motivational speakers? And you've probably said that before too. That is literally what they are. Their goal when they preach their sermons are to inspire and motivate. That just makes you a motivational speaker. You're not a Bible teacher. You're a motivator. You're an encourager. I'm not saying that there's never a time to encourage in the course of your sermons or inspire. I mean, there's if you have opportunity, take it. But if that is your primary goal, then that is what you are. If your primary goal is to teach the Bible, well, then you're a Bible teacher. And that's what I'd want pastors to see themselves as. You are Bible teachers. And then, once again, down here, they have all these speakers, and the purpose of one of these speakers, Ben Panner, he works this ministry designed to raise up the next generation of expositional preachers. I would start out, if I was to do this, I'm really trying to think about how I would get my point across. If I was to do this, I would start out by asking some very basic questions. Basic Bible knowledge type questions. Such as, who was the first king of the northern kingdom? Anybody know? Now, some of you here watching do know. But do they know? Who was the first king of the northern kingdom? I'm waiting, right? Maybe somebody will say Jeroboam. Maybe. I would consider asking them, what prophet was a contemporary with Hosea? I'm waiting, right? Waiting. Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet who was a contemporary with Hosea. I might ask something along the lines of, what was the purpose of Jesus' parables? Now that one is not a single word answer. That one is very much got to have a little bit more thought and knowledge, but if they're going to say, well, parable is a story that is using familiar things to convey deep theological truths. That's not correct. You are wrong. That's not the purpose of a parable. Parable was a curse. It was condemnation. For they have eyes, but they do not see, ears they do not hear. Their hearts are waxed gross. I would ask David says he wears a vest. Vests are very good. I like vests. I think I'm too young to wear a vest. I think I'm too young. I think that when I get a little bit older, David, I will start wearing vests more. I've tried it, and I don't feel like it works for me yet. When I get a little bit older, I'll wear a vest. For the most part, I stick to a sports coat. Sometimes I'll wear a tie if I'm not wearing a sports coat. On some special occasions, I'll wear both. But look like a preacher. Thank you, David. I have no problem with a vest. Back to what I was saying. I would ask some very basic questions. And I would imagine that a good number of them would not know how to answer those questions. And sorry if you're hearing a little bit of sound right there. I was getting a phone call right now. And that would be my point. My point would be, listen, you have all spent too much time trying to inspire and motivate, and you have not taught the Bible. And so you are so far removed from being a Bible teacher, you don't even know how to do it because you have no Bible knowledge. Instead of trying to come up with some sermon series that is going to motivate your congregation, do a sermon series over a book of the Bible. And every Sunday morning, teach them verse by verse. But don't do it, ready? Expositionally. Don't take any given passage and try to make application. David, who is not a right divider, but is a dispensationalist, he and I will agree that not every passage is meant to be directly applied to us. So don't do it. If it is applicable to you, if the context concerns you, then fine, draw application. If it is not about you, then don't worry about it. Knowledge in and of itself is a valuable thing. It is a good thing. So if I was invited to teach the Priority of Preaching Conference, I would focus on making them Bible teachers teaching exegetically. What does the text say? And Paul Washer may cry in agony about how, right, Paul Washer, is that his name? Yes. Yeah. I think so. His whole point is like, preachers, you shouldn't worry about exegeting a text. You need to be speaking to the hearts of people. He may, cry in pain and agony, but that's what I would do. That's what I would teach. That's what I would emphasize. And so with that, that's my show for you today. I do apologize for a little bit of a late start due to the technical issues, but we're here, right? My mom says she's not going to watch the Super Bowl halftime show. She's going to be watching the alternative. I guess that's going to be put on by Erica Kirk, Turning Point USA. That'll be interesting to see. And so, with all of that, really do appreciate each and every one of you. I hope that you have a great rest of the weekend. Be safe, be warm. If the weather permits, we'll have church service. I'll be going live. It really irks me not to have church. I'm kind of one of those rain, sleet, snow, or hail kind of people. We're going to do it. But we will see. If it's a, kind of a every, once in a decade kind of ice storm, we're going to have to play it by ear. But in the meantime, it's great to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us on Friday. Please share this show with somebody. Maybe it'll help them. And I appreciate all that you do to support our ministry and ministries like it. So this has been Shields and Arrows. Thank you all so much.